Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule. What makes our boards unique are they are built right here in York. They're built using material that grows right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers. There's a lot of time that goes into these boards, between 40 and 60 hours, start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far one of my top favorite parts. It's just you and a shaping stand, a board, and a hand plane. Everything else is out of your view. It's simple, it's pleasurable, it's quiet. You can be with your thoughts and you can just kind of be present. There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind. Once we've shaped it down and the board's looking like it's supposed to look like, it's time for it to go into the glassing room. 4-ounce fiberglass, laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board. Once both sides are lamb coated, it's time to put in the hardware. Drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leash plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, it goes back into the glassing room. We brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy and shiny and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. Put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of work and the amount of passion that went into the board. So I'm not really looking at hours and efficiency. We're looking at like doing it right and enjoying it as we go.
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 Grand Marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still a social taboo. The CEO of a Beijing-based internet company is on a mission to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blued is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blued is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blued, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blued in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences' virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blued means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，Blue能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同志互联网公司。
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of like predominantly Asian artists, you know, really like making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but like for what was the question.
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness, residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just like, damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being like, okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of like my own kind of private office, basically. Like, to be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would like take pisses here, you know what I mean? Like, it was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy, and like just the shit that he was saying, like the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't, and he came up with that stick like 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute, bro.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it, but the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just like everything about it, man. Just like, it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets like super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I did the sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chiga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything that rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. You know, it's just more entertaining. We just edited it as tight as possible, put it up, and it really worked.
12 in the morning, pop shells for the living in.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on and a Reebok pouch. This is the hardest nigga of all time.
He said, when you come for a trigger like me, that was dope.
Like, it's just lit, and I think people will take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well. And one day, it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it, like who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up, I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it, like next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this,
It's just Taco Bell. What could possibly go wrong?
to creating something Tonight, Rich Chigga has a show in New York City. Tickets sold out in an hour.
I came here, I'm first online. I was here at 1.
Yeah,
I was the third person online.
So why'd you get here so early?
Because I want to see Rich Chigga. I want to touch him.
What do you guys think of Joji?
He's
That's my dad, son. You guys cop the new EP or like?
Yeah. I woke up at 6 in the morning just to cop that shit. And then I listened to it, and that shit started making me cry.
This is actually kind of exciting. Every time, this never gets old. Like, you live online and social media, but like, there's nothing like just being with the people.
More often than not, viral success happens by accident. And then after an appearance on Ellen or Jimmy Kimmel, the creator's star power fizzles out. But Idiot Rising has figured out how to turn potential gimmicks into brands with an actual following that keeps coming back for the next thing.
Oh, shit!
So keep an eye out for Idiot's next move. But more than likely, it won't be covered on network television or terrestrial radio. Although, as they've already proven, nowadays that really doesn't matter.
Online retailer Farfetch is betting it can shape the future. This is its concept store, showcasing the latest in retail tech.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers, touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the connected rail. And this is using a combination of RFID and ultrasound. The RFID signal recognizes the product, and the ultrasound recognizes the movement. Take the product off, and then you'll start to see your products appear. And essentially, it's like online browsing behavior. Whichever products you touch and pick up in the store are automatically sent to your app. This is effectively what you've created is your in-store wish list. In the middle, you'll see essentially a hologram of the product. What the customer sees, they control the experience on a touch device. What this allows the customer to do is take elements of products and then add their own style to it. Right, so this is the connected mirror. So in this example, I see my products. I select a coat, and that's tried it, and it's slightly too big for me. So what I can do is choose an alternative size and send a request to the sales associate, and they'll bring that size to me in the fitting room mirror. You'll also see that we've got some product recommendations here. Crucially, the sales associate's able to push items into the mirror from their device. If you wanted to, you could simply use the mirror and pay and go. Your items would then be packed and dispatched to you afterwards.
Do you want me to turn you so you're looking outwards? Yes, please. How about there? First time we came out with B, Jade said, it feels like I've been released from prison. Do you want these, Mrs.?
Definitely.
Definitely. Right.
Yeah.
And she could say hello to everybody, people she hadn't seen for months.
It's
Hi,
Jade.
it's Jade.
Oh. So you can talk to Jade through this.
Hi, Katie. She's there.
Hi.
Every time anyone's seen her, they want to know why she's there. And it's kind of the opposite of when you're in a wheelchair and people see you and they kind of go, oh, should I look? I don't know what the right protocol is. When there's a tiny robot with its bright little eyes going around just looking happy everywhere, it really opens you up for conversation.
You've got some friends here, look.
Hiya. When I saw her for the first time, I remember thinking, this is going to change things. This is one of those points where if this was a book, this would be the cliffhanger. condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that I have a lot of dislocations, there's a lot of pain, and a lot of seizures and whatnot. So I can end up on my own in my room for long periods of time. A lot of the time, with a condition like my own, of course there's the pain, and the pain is bad, and the dislocations are bad, and the seizures and being in paralysis and never knowing whether you're going to be able to wake up properly tomorrow, that's bad. But what's worse still is being able to count the number of people you see a day on one hand.
Are you ready?
Sure am, I'm just hoping the connection's going to stay.
Yeah, me too. Alright, here we go.
When you're used to just the same little metre by metre and a half window every day, and you've been there for months, being able to just see the sky from somewhere else, or the tops of trees, or a sign, is incredible. Or being able to have that kind of chat in the car that most people would probably take for granted.
I'm going to go past Grandma and Grandad so you can give them a wave. Now, if Jade is particularly seizure-y, she can still take part. And that's brilliant, really, because before she would just be left in a bed or in a house with just her carers. It's quite a small world, that.
Right, so there's one of her. Here, this costume I'm busy making at the moment. When I'm not on bed rest and I'm not just wearing pyjamas all the time, I enjoy being able to dress as different characters and go to Comic Cons and that kind of thing, because it just lets me show a different side of myself, and it's a bit of fun. If you can't go out that often, you've got to enjoy it when you do. Was that? Good. It's one of those weird things where I want to not have to use B because I want to be well enough to be able to go to those places myself. Like, it really makes a big difference to me to be able to go into school. But the thing is, with my condition fluctuating all of the time, I can't go into school reliably. And so far it's interesting. Still a few little things that we need to work out, but for the most part I think it's going fairly well, and it's brilliant because I can really tell the difference between today and yesterday. How yesterday I forced myself to go into school when I wasn't very well and I was really tired afterwards and ended up having loads of seizures, whereas today I've been able to do all of the work. I've been able to keep a clear head and not be ill, which means I'm able to be more focused on my schoolwork.
So there is my first step of working, is to simplify root 8. The algebra test is next week.
Now I'm trying to make friendships which I'll be able to maintain with B. Before that, I end up letting people down quite often. B gives me hope, yeah. She's just always there. And if I can't do something, she can. And if I need sort of assistance to be able to make commitments, then she's there, and she means that I feel like a more valuable person because I'm more reliable.
When it debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for fifth generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The cubicle represents a tyranny. It confines your imagination, your thoughts, into a small physical area. Imagine pretty much every software engineer or finance person being able to, disconnect from their desk and look at holographic monitors on a beach and doing their work from there. That's not going to be science fiction. It's the modern office place.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future. A startup called Meta thinks it's getting there first, thanks to a big bet that it's made on augmented reality.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Meta.
Thank you.
Call it a 360-degree office where you can spatialize your thoughts as part of your workflow for education, architecture, design, engineering, etc.
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality. VR totally blocks your ability to see or hear the real world. AR overlays holograms onto what you already see. Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel familiar.
You grab the hologram instead of using a controller or a mouse, and your brain already knows how to do it. In other words, we've designed an operating system that humanity has always known how to use. So you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball, and now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right? You see those two circles? They get small, and then they turn into this glowing white ball, and then I can move my hand around supernaturally. I can do this with 2 hands and rotate the thing. I can stretch it. I can throw it back right into the shelving system, and that's all you have to learn to become a modern worker.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors, trading them in for Meta's augmented reality headsets. Mayron thinks that in less than a decade, we'll all be just wearing strips of glass that can project holograms.
In the early 80s, everybody had computers on their desktop, but no one was using them because they had a lot of work to do. So they were still using typewriters. And at some point, the CEO took all the typewriters away and everybody was forced to use their computers. So it's very exciting to see a new generation of technology, a new paradigm.
I consider us like pioneers in the holographic wild. I'm pulling up my browser with my hands and sending out emails to colleagues and just kind of really acclimating to the new environment.
Now you're putting on my computer, essentially. Our digital lives live on our phones. We have all of our pictures and notes and all these kinds of things. So, and why don't you write yourself a little sticky note? I like it. And go ahead and just take your fist right over the top of the sticky note and close your fist. And now.
Oh, what? Meta's own transition to augmented reality has run into plenty of unexpected problems. And it's still going to be a while before you'll start to see these devices in your office. But I think it's a future worth waiting for.
If we could see these holograms between us, we will have been able to share our work with one another more naturally, more efficiently, and more productively than ever before. Humanity will have evolved slightly.
This is Hatsune Miku, Japan's sensational virtual pop star. She's released over 100,000 songs in multiple languages and performed sold-out concerts around the world. Her image has appeared in games, on TV, in car races, and is even etched on the side of a Japanese space rocket.
I came for Hatsune Miku, Carlos.
She's Lady Gaga's favorite digital pop star and opened shows for her in the US 3 years ago. Tens of thousands of fans attended her exhibition and live shows near Tokyo recently.
理想のアイドルっていうと、どの曲でもミクはすごい綺麗に歌ってくれる。
他没有缺点啊，没有任何让我们感到不开心的一些新闻。
She's everything to everybody. That's probably why she's so popular.
Miku's creator, Hiroyuki Ito, and his Sapporo-based company have been developing the virtual diva for over 10 years.
初音ミクとは、キャラクターとしてすごく、YouTube とかで検索すると、たくさんの初音ミクが出てくるんですけども、元々の、初音ミクのその原点は歌声を合成する、ソフトウェアなんです。
Both the software and character are named Hatsune Miku, meaning the first sound of the future. Originally based on Yamaha's Vocaloid technology, Miku the software has a sound bank containing voice samples and a huge array of tools. You input the melody and lyrics, then Miku the character sings them. To date, Krypton has sold 120,000 software licenses at $200 each to fans around the world who use it to create numerous songs and share them online. Some of the fan-created songs are chosen to be part of Miku's concerts, for which they're paid a royalty fee.
もともと初音ミクっていうその、存在自体がそのボトムアップって言いますか、中にはアマチュアクリエイターじゃなくて今もうすでに、プロになって活躍している方もいらっしゃるんですけども。
The company also has other revenue streams. It makes money from merchandising, licensing deals, and concert ticket sales. According to the real-life musicians who perform with Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star is interesting and surprising.
今年で3年ぐらい、ちょうど3年ぐらいやってきて、ライブも数十本、数百本だったので、そういうことが演奏によって起こせるためのなんかそういう器みたいな感じになってきて、初音ミクらしさって僕はあんまりない。初音ミクって何だってあり。
For Ito, Miku has the potential to change the way we think about music.
そういう新しいそのテクノロジーによって新しい音楽のあり方っていうものを模索していきたいと思っていました。
And for her fans, it goes even further.
初音ミクって魂がないので、だからみんなに魂を作り上げるために存在しています。
Now, there are a lot of fitness gadgets out there. In my quest to get fit, I tested 17 of them over the last few months. At least one personal trainer I know was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I've been watching these new technologies come to the market for almost as long as I've been a personal trainer. They're just tricks and tropes. They're not much different than the Bowflex machines or, to be honest, the original Jane Fonda workout video.
But some of these gadgets that are just coming to the market do so much more than what they used to do, just tracking your activities. Out of all of them, this chest strap was my favorite. It comes with a robot coach that points to the future, one where you might not need a human trainer at all. And it works like this. You wear the chest strap so that it can read your heart rate, and that connects to Move's free app that talks to you.
Welcome to Move Heart Rate Hit Outdoor Running. Let's get moving and warm up in Zone 2.
Move's computerized coach tells you what to do at that exact moment, whether you're running outside or you're doing body weight exercises indoors.
Swing your arms faster to get your legs moving quicker. Let's crush this round.
And by reading your heart rate, she knows exactly how hard you're working. She keeps you honest.
Way to go, you are in the target zone. Keep pushing, you're almost at the end of the round. Don't give up.
I've been running for 7 years now, and my biggest problem is that I never push myself hard enough. I end up going on the same slow, comfortable 30-minute jog, but the Move HR Burn blasted me out of that rut. By the end of these half-hour exercises, I was drenched in sweat in a way that I never am when I work out alone. Training with a real person is great, whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But humans, they're expensive. For the rest of us, this $60 gadget is all you need.
what does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning. He used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the collateral murder video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan war logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq war logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
Expose everything you won't admit.
And action.
This entire video is based on a true story. When I do like motivational speeches or even tell myself like love yourself and you should love yourself.
This is Lily Singh.
But to fans all over the world, she's the YouTube star Superwoman.
What if everyone's a girl, Superwoman? I know we can change the world for the better, one positive day at a time.
My parents now know what I do. They didn't know what I did for a long time in the beginning of my career. I was just making videos in my room. They had no idea.
Mom, Dad, have you seen my keys? I can't find them anywhere. Because you're always on phone.
Until someone called them, like a family member from another part of Canada, was like, Canada, is your daughter making videos? And I think my mom was like, I don't know, Lily, are you making videos?
Just making videos grew into an entire career. Today, Lily's YouTube channel has some 12 million subscribers, over 2 billion views, and guest stars like Michelle Obama, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Seth Rogen.
I think a lot of young girls are raised to believe that you're going to go to school and then graduate and then get married and then get a job and have kids.
And Lily was on that path, all the way through a psychology degree at York University in Toronto. But when she started thinking about a career,
I started to immensely panic and think something was wrong with me because I tried to figure out my life and it wasn't working in that straight line.
It was 2010, and YouTube was only 5 years old.
I thought nothing of YouTube. I was probably the last person in my circle of friends to discover YouTube. And I remember when I did, I thought, this is so strange. There's people making videos in their rooms, and other people are watching them.
So she figured, why not give it a shot?
I one day posted a video because I was sad, and I wanted to be creative and happy.
She didn't know how to edit video or write scripts, so she winged it.
It was so bad and so cringe, and my expectation was literally nothing. I was like, I'm gonna put this video up, a couple of my friends are gonna watch it, probably make fun of me, and that's gonna be the end of this. The second and third video came from, wait, 70 people watched my first one, can I get 80 to watch the next one?
She kept creating, she kept posting, and the viewers kept coming. Lily had found an audience.
A lot of the comments were, oh my God, there's a brown girl on YouTube.
More specifically, Indian. Lily's parents immigrated to Canada from India, and Lily was born and raised in Scarborough, near Toronto.
My home life was awesome. My parents, even though I portrayed them to be quite strict in my videos.
Oi, Lily, where the rest of your skirt, huh? I teach you like this, to walk around like this, showing everything to everyone?
They actually aren't like that at all. They're pretty modern and pretty cool.
Your dress is short. Don't know what for.
And were pretty lenient with me. I mean, I got away with a lot of things. I was a brat. I was a brat.
She had a different idea of what she wanted out of life than other kids. In a grade school graduation slideshow, her classmates said they wanted to be lawyers and doctors.
And then I came up and I was like, rapper.
Making out with your friends, man. But then you say that you hate hoes.
I could just feel my parents being like, why?
Because that's just not something women really did in the Singh family.
I know there was a ton of people that weren't happy about my birth being a female, so I think, and that's some real-ish, but it's a real thing. The best thing I could have done to prove to so many people that didn't want my mom to have a daughter was to become Superwoman.
What up, everyone? It's your girl, Superwoman.
It was the name of Lily's favorite hip-hop song by Lil Mo featuring Fabulous.
I love the song so much because it was one of the only songs at the time that was an empowering female song, where Lil Mo's going on about, like, I will save guys with my superpowers, and I will save girls with my superpowers, and I am the Superwoman. I thought, this name that I've had for so long that empowered me when I was younger, I'm gonna make this my screen name. Maybe there should be a new series.
Superwoman didn't just burst onto the scene overnight with a viral video. It was a steady climb fueled by hard work.
The moment that I thought this is going somewhere and this could be a career was the first time I performed internationally. It was in India. And it was the first time where I was truly across the world and people knew my videos.
Singh has transformed herself from a bratty kid to an internet personality to a media mogul. She starred in a feature film, A Trip to Unicorn Island, in 2016. And her book, How to Be a Boss, hit the New York Times bestseller list in 2017 while she was on a 30-city international tour. Lily started out with the goal of getting millions of subscribers and financial security.
Hurry the hell up!
But after surpassing those goals, success has new meaning.
I've really come to terms with the fact that my definition of success is what's the best legacy I can leave behind. And it's not the number of views and the number of subscribers. It is the number of people that can say, this girl changed my life or changed something in my life positively.
CTE is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CT in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in the laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice.
Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob did with his company. I want our writers to be partners. All of my senior people are locked into the company. They all have equity or they have a path to equity based on business results. That's something that we never had at Parker. Our benefits are world-class, and everything that we've done at Venice is completely different from that model. When Steve Tanzer, who is the most experienced active wine critic in America, wants to work with us, that says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime, you know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left The Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company, and that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW.
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! That's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag #GiveDivas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to the big stars' entrance music. And their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Our world is changing. Every day, it changes a little faster. Some changes are too small to see. Others, too big to handle. Sometimes, change feels slow. So slow, we don't even notice. Other times, it happens all at once, and we can't keep up. For our climate, change means many things. And between too small to see and too big to handle, there is a whole world of difference. The clock is ticking. This is Bloomberg Green.
Saving the seas. This week, the deep-sea diver who stopped writing the ocean's obituary to find a solution. Enric Sala tells us why the next 10 years matter most. And globalization needs to get greener. Shipping accounts for nearly an eighth of all transport emissions. How can the industry clean up its act? Plus, protecting coastlines comes at a huge environmental cost. But one Israeli startup found a way to keep the sea out and the animals in. From London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green. After more than a decade of studying the ocean as an academic, Enric Sala realized he was writing the ocean's obituary. He quit his job and became a full-time conservationist. As an in-house explorer for National Geographic, he's clocked more than 5,000 open water dives. He's also founded Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to lobby countries to protect their oceans. To date, it has helped create marine reserves equivalent to half the size of Canada. I spoke to him about his mission and why it's so urgent.
The state of the world's oceans is really bad. We have lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Sharks, groupers, cod, tuna. More than half of the fish stocks are overfished, which means that we are taking them out of the water faster than they can reproduce. More than half of the ocean is affected by industrial fishing, and global warming is killing coral reefs all around the world. The ocean is in a trajectory of decline.
Can you just visualize for our viewers who never get to see the kind of things you are able to see, what an ocean and healthy ecosystem looks like versus one that's next to a bustling economic and industrialized area?
Coral reefs in the United States, in the Florida Keys, are down to only 2% of what they used to be. Before, 80 to 90% of the bottom on a coral reef in the Caribbean was covered by live coral. Now, Florida Keys have only 2%. The average in the Caribbean is about 5% of the bottom covered by live coral. The rest is covered by slime and seaweed. And most of the fish you can see are this big. And it is very, very rare that if you jump into any place in the Caribbean at random, you see a shark. It's very, very rare. Now, let's go to Millennium Atoll, for example. An atoll that is uninhabited and fished south of the equator in the Central Pacific, belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. 2009, we conducted the first underwater expedition to this island, and I still remember the first time. Jumped over the side of the boat, and as soon as the bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by 15 gray reef sharks. After a couple minutes, the sharks decided that we were boring, and they went back to do their thing. And you look down, 90% of the seafloor is covered by thriving coral, and it's full of fish, and a sea turtle comes by. Now, this abundance that we rarely see anywhere except in well-managed marine reserves. This is what the ocean used to be like, and this is what we have learned from going to these pristine places.
And you write in your book that you're writing the obituary of ocean life. What's the cure?
The cure is doing less harm. Basically, there are three things that we are doing to the ocean. One is we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. Two, we are turning the ocean warmer and more acidic because of man-made climate change. And 3, we are throwing in everything that we don't want, our waste and our plastic. We need basically to reverse these trends.
Does this mean that a lot of this falls to governments and their policies?
That's a big part of it, because it is governments that regulate fishing and mineral extraction and oil extraction. It is governments that have the legal authority to create large marine reserves in the ocean. But also, local communities have an important role to play, because some of the most successful protected areas in the ocean are community-led and community-managed marine reserves. So when the fish come back, the divers come in. And that creates huge economic opportunities through ecotourism. These areas that are managed by communities are very successful because the communities have a vested interest in having as many fish as possible inside them so they can enjoy the benefits.
What from the pandemic has changed your view when it comes to protection of the environment?
Nature has given us a very strong signal of how fast it can recover if we just give it space. Everybody was fascinated by all these videos of the whales and the dolphins coming into marinas and mountain lions on the streets of Santiago in Chile, wild goats in the UK. Nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back if we just give it space. This is why we need to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030.
How do healthy marine ecosystems help in the fight against climate change, though?
Most people see the ocean as a victim of climate change, but the ocean can also be a solution, because we know that the more life there is in the ocean, like big fish and big whales, the more these organisms help to make the ocean productive and absorb more CO2. The kelp forest, seagrass beds, all of these are important ecosystems in the ocean that are similar to the forests on the land, that capture a lot of our carbon pollutions.
What are you most excited about in your field?
We have 10 years to fix this problem. Global fisheries catch is going down, stocks are collapsing. Business as usual means that by 2050, 90% of the coral reefs are gone, that most commercial fisheries have collapsed. That affects food security, that affects migration of people. We have 10 years to get to peak greenhouse gas emissions and then go carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 years to protect at least 30% of the ocean so we can restore much of this health and productivity, not just for saving biodiversity, but also saving our life support system. We are not talking about something that is apart from us. We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. So these 10 years are probably the most critical in the history of humanity.
The most accurate measurements of changing oceans will come from space. While Enric Sala explores what lies beneath, a new satellite is giving us data from above.
We'll learn more about our oceans and climate change, but from space. A new satellite's been launched from California. Its mission: track the accelerating rise of sea levels.
Well, the main instruments on board include a dual-frequency radar altimeter. This is the primary instrument of the mission, and that's the one that's measuring sea surface height, significant wave height, and wind speed over the ocean. And from those measurements, we can actually have the superb measurements that we expect of sea level rise.
Data gathered from Sentinel-6 will be used alongside information from other satellites to build as complete a picture of the oceans as possible.
With a long record, we can precisely measure the acceleration. We eventually can detect new regime, tipping points. For example, if there is a runaway in the melting of Greenland or Antarctica, sea level will record this runaway change because it is an integrator of all changes that are occurring in the climate system. So we will be able to see some change, big change in the global climate.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects that sea level rise will increasingly threaten U.S. coastlines. One example, the southern tip of Manhattan is expected to flood 20 to 40 times a year by 2030.
11 of the 15 largest megacities are located at the coast, and this number will double. The number of people living in coastal area will double by 2060. So, knowing how much sea level is rising at the coast and how much it will rise in the future, in coastal areas is as obvious. It's obviously a major goal for human beings.
Coming up, from sails to steam to oil, the shipping industry is no stranger to change. But how will it navigate the next transition? This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. Now, for your roundup of this week's latest climate news, Jennifer Zabazaja has your green in brief.
Here's the climate news you need to know. Deforestation of the world's largest rainforest has hit a 12-year high. More than 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed in 2020. That's a 9.5% increase from a year earlier. Government data shows that destruction has soared since President Jair Bolsonaro took office and weakened environmental enforcement. The Amazon is home to millions of species and plants and is critical in the fight against climate change. Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but at what cost to the environment? The cryptocurrency is energy intensive, and there are concerns if it becomes mainstream. According to MIT, back in 2018, Bitcoin's carbon footprint was almost as big as Portugal's. Want to get better at tackling climate change? We'll hire more women. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Firms with 30% or more women in top jobs tend to perform better when it comes to the environment and are more likely to set clear climate goals. Shopping online is more popular than ever now, but the price of convenience is measured in CO2, and more deliveries means more fuel burned and more packaging wasted. So what can companies do? Well, many are becoming more efficient and sourcing more clean energy for their data centers and warehouses. And England's farmers will be paid to go green after Brexit. As European subsidies are phased out, they'll get new money to encourage them to produce healthy, sustainable food. Poor farming practices are one of the leading drivers of water pollution and the loss of biodiversity. I'm Jennifer Zabazaja in New York. Anne-Marie, back to you.
The shipping industry is more than just the grease on the wheels of globalization. It's its chief enabler. 11 billion tons of goods are transported by ship each year, the biggest contributors being 2 billion tons of oil, 1 billion tons of iron ore, and 350 million tons of grain. According to the International Chamber of Shipping, 80% of Europe's imports and exports happen over the seas. And for such a vast industry, it also contributes its fair share of emissions. Shipping makes up 12% of global transport energy consumption. So how does it clean up its act? Earlier, I caught up with Bloomberg Green reporter Laura Milan about just how big of a challenge this is going to be for the industry.
one of the main issues is size. So about 90% of the world's cargo is moved by ships. So obviously changing such a huge industry is not going to be fast, and it's not going to be easy. The second issue has to do with technology. So ships obviously travel for many days at sea. It's not as easy for them to refuel as it would be for a car, for example, going on a road. And the sector still hasn't found a technology that's economically viable and that's zero emissions, and equivalent to the electric batteries for cars, for example.
But actions are being put in place to make the industry a bit more environmentally friendly. Walk us through those steps that they're taking.
That's it. So there's a first step that would involve using low emission fuels or biofuels that would significantly reduce the existing emissions. And then at a regulatory level, when it comes to the policy and the governments, there are steps being made as well. I would say that the most significant ones come from the European Union, which started to track emissions a few years ago and is now looking to include shipping emissions in the emissions trading system. So that would significantly reduce and help calculate the emissions from the shipping industry. Now, China is taking similar steps. So at the moment, regions need to report shipping emissions to the central government. And finally, we have the International Maritime Organization with a pledge to reduce shipping emissions by 50% in 2050. Now, we must say that that pledge has been considered insufficient by environmental groups, but at least some steps are being taken.
So to get to 2050, the industry obviously is going to need to start tapping some new technologies. What new technologies are you seeing being introduced into the shipping industry?
So we have seen pilot technologies being developed for years now, but what's interesting about this current moment is that we're seeing big players invest in these technologies that are not yet economically viable, but that one day might be. So for example, we are seeing earlier this year, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, Cargill, saying they will invest in attaching sails to their ships so they can make any technology that they run their ships on more efficient. Similarly, we have seen a spin-off of Airbus, the aeronautics company, developing a similar application with kites. We have been following also developments in hydrogen. So at the moment, hydrogen fuel seems like a good option, a possible option when it has been developed and when it becomes economically viable. And we have Vestas, for example, the world's largest turbine maker, developing some ships that will be able to run on hydrogen in the near future.
Coming up, rising sea levels means humans need to get creative when it comes to coastal defenses. But how do we protect both ourselves and the environment? One Israeli startup may have the answer. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Green. In London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. After water, what's the resource that humans use the most? It's concrete, 3 tons a year for every person on the planet. And engineers estimate it's used twice as much as all other building materials combined. And it comes with a huge environmental cost. Concrete, not just in cities, it's a common feature on our coastlines too. And that's taking a toll on biodiversity. But one Israeli startup has found a way of making sea defenses stronger and encouraging life to thrive.
If you take a look at concrete structures like breakwaters or seawalls, the water around them is often clear. That's not actually a good thing, because it means there's no life. Marine species are actually most abundant in coastal areas, but it's also where us humans prefer to live too. So when we build here, we drive away marine life.
The concrete in the marine world has a lot of additives, a lot of chemicals, and some of those materials are actually leaching out, and they're actually prohibiting marine life to thrive. If we keep developing without any regards to natural communities, there is a tilting point from which beyond we cannot really go back.
In the coastal city of Tel Aviv, an Israeli startup wants to revolutionize our urban coastlines. Their sea defenses are transforming lifeless man-made structures into teeming ecosystems. They do this by replacing standard concrete with their own special cement formulas.
As opposed to regular cement-based concrete, e-concrete includes certain elements that enhance the growth of marine flora and fauna of plants and animals. Our admix, which is kind of our secret sauce, is basically kind of sealing the concrete, making it less aggressive for the marine environment. That once we add it, we enable life to flourish.
In the lab, the team run tests to identify what mixes will work best for marine life.
So we take really ice cube size concrete slabs of different compositions, and we put larvae, 20, 30, 50. We need to have a lot of replicates. We're geeky scientists, so we have to have a lot of replication and controls. And then within a few days or just a few weeks, we can get an answer on their preference. So obviously, if they die, they have a very low tolerance to that specific concrete mix design. And if they thrive or they flourish, we can quantify that very quickly.
E-concrete says it typically sees double the biodiversity of regular grey concrete. From fish and sea caterpillars on their armour blocks to crabs on these tidal pools that sit on the shoreline.
This unit holds water during the low tide, so it's always moist, and therefore it has a very comfortable habitat for crabs and sea anemones and sea stars, etc. These pools have been here for less than 3 months, and this is already what you can see. It's covered with life. See the rock around it, which has been here for probably 10, 20, maybe even more years, only has a thin layer of green algae, and that's it.
As well as the composition of the cement mix, E-concrete designs its products specifically to the marine environment it will be deployed, to create niches for endangered species, or to develop nurseries like these oyster beds. The final part of the equation is creating complex surface textures to mimic natural rock or coral, an environment that helps anchor young organisms.
When concrete elements are being cast, the typical goal is to have a very slick surface, very, very smooth. The idea is to get the water to flow right across it. When we're designing e-concrete with a rough surface, we want to do the complete opposite. We want to slow the water when they are crossing the structure so that the larvae can actually adhere and attach to the surface.
E-concrete has to offer its clients more than just ecological credentials. Over time, they've discovered that creating hospitable habitats for marine life adds another advantage, one that is surely hard to ignore.
We've seen evidence to the fact that the growth of the organisms on the concrete create kind of a layer of defense. Just the addition of weight, we can actually gain stability and strength over time.
This is let's say the unit when we put it in the water. And this is after a year in the water. And what you can see here is all the oysters are completely covering it. We designed the units so they can withstand the forces and perform in terms of structural performance, but they can also be a backbone for ecological enhancement.
The company tests its miniature designs in tanks full of real seawater, rocks, plants, and animal life from around the world.
What we're looking for is the accumulation of calcium carbonate on the surface of the concrete of different mixes and different designs. This is the process that we call biogenic buildup. So with time, we get a buildup of calcium carbonate that is sourced from marine organisms on the surface of the concrete. And we actually encapsulate the concrete with a natural rock. So when the organism die, in case of a coral, it will die, and then another coral will sit on it, and that's how a reef is growing.
The hope that our man-made structures could become stronger over time also means better economics. The units require less maintenance and could therefore stay in the water for longer. E-concrete, though, is just a few years old, so it needs more time to really quantify the longevity of its products. But the company are certain their products are better for the environment, and not just in terms of improving biodiversity.
We're kind of trying to offset some of that immense carbon footprint of the concrete industry.
Construction is responsible for about 11% of global carbon emissions. By adding a biological crust to their products, e-concrete prevents some CO2 from being released into the atmosphere.
For every kilogram of calcium carbonate being created by those marine organisms, we're offsetting 120 grams of CO2. So think about building a port infrastructure or a city waterfront that is an active carbon sink. I think that's a great advantage of the technology.
That does it for this week, but let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Follow us at Climate. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
It is live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, streaming on YouTube. It is Thursday, March 18, 2020. I'm Carol Masser along with Tim Stenovic. We've got the stock rally, kind of running out of steam. 10-year Treasury yields, though, climbing above 1.7% for the first time since January of 2020. 30-year breaching 2.5% for the first time since August of 2019. Feels like a day of note on a few levels, including the U.S. on track for a vaccine milestone. We've got so much to talk about over the next few hours. Let's get you going, though, with a look at that trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, and happy Thursday to Carol Masser. We're looking at a tug-of-war between growth and value investors. It's playing out with the Dow Jones Industrial Average higher for a second day. In fact, the Dow at a record, trading at 33,187, up 171 points right now, up by 0.5%. Tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 in the red on the minus side, down 1.6%. The NASDAQ Composite Index lower now by 1.4%. NASDAQ is down 186 points. S&P 500 Index down 12, a drop there of 0.3%. Again, the Dow up by 0.5%. We just heard Vince Signorella talking about the 10-year. The yield right now, 1.72%. A rally in financial shares briefly pushed the S&P toward toward positive territory, but right now we've got energy stocks certainly weighing on the market. West Texas Intermediate crude down 5.5%, 61.03 a barrel. Gold lower now by 0.6%, 17.34 the ounce. A couple of very high-profile earnings after the bell today. We'll be all over those numbers as they break, but Nike will be reporting. Nike shares down by 0.3%, and FedEx higher now by 1.2%. FedEx gaining $3.03. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It is time now for the Market Drivers Report. All right, let's get to it. Let's set the Business Week agenda. Dave Wilson with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News on the remote access in New Jersey. Mike McKee, international economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News. He's right here in our New York City bureau on the phone. Hey, let's start, though, with you, Mike, because day after that two-day Fed meeting, and I feel like people are rethinking what they heard from Jay Powell. Maybe not rethinking, maybe thinking maybe he got it wrong.
Well, no, I think that people in the markets are generally thinking he could be wrong, but we're going to go with it for now. Because basically what you seem to see happening is people setting themselves up or resetting prices for an environment in which interest rates stay very low, but the Fed risks the idea of higher inflation. So we're seeing a real steepening of the yield curve today. And we got some numbers today that suggested that's going to be the way things are. The Philadelphia Fed numbers stealing the headline from the jobless claims numbers. Philadelphia Fed at 51.8. That's the strongest since 1973. Quick, who was president in 1973?
Was it Nixon or was it right after Nixon?
It was Nixon in 1973. Yeah, but you go back to 1980. Who was president in 1980?
Carter.
Jimmy
Carter?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Dave wins the prize. But it's so
how come
long
he wins
ago.
the prize?
1980 was the last time the prices paid index was so high in the Philadelphia Fed numbers. So we really got some evidence that maybe the market's not foolish in thinking that we're going to get inflation. The question is, can Jay Powell be trusted with the idea that the inflation will only be temporary? Convention, the jobless claims 770,000, they went up, surprised people.
Yeah, well, and I want to bring you in, Dave, but I do want to ask you one more thing, Mike, is that there's inflation and then there's runaway inflation. And
Yes, his argument is this is nothing like the inflation that we saw in 1980 when you had Paul Volcker about to tip the economy into recession to break inflation's back, because at that time you had labor unions that were powerful and could demand higher wages. And we weren't in a world of globalization where there's slack somewhere in the world always. And if a company needs to produce something more cheaply, they can go somewhere else and do it. So the Powell and the Fed believe that inflation dynamics have changed so they can get through this. He pointed out 7 years at zero after the great financial crisis and no inflation to speak of.
Exactly. We all remember that well. All right, Dave Wilson. So come on in. We're bouncing around a little bit off our highs and lows of the session. What's interesting about the internals of the trade here today?
Well, I mean, you've kind of got on the one hand, on the other hand thing going. I mean, you look on the one hand, you see financial stocks leading the way among the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. There's actually a fairly even split between the number of shares up and down overall. But, you know, what Mike's talking about with the steepening of the yield curve basically translates into a bigger gap between, say, money market rates and bond yields, and that means more money potentially for the financial companies down the line from their loans and investments. So, you know, that's why you're seeing those shares, whether we're talking about the biggest banks, you know, the likes of JP Morgan Chase or the regional lenders doing well. Now, the flip side of that is what's going on with big tech. You know, you've got, you know, technology stocks down. You've got communication services, which is Facebook and Google's owner Alphabet, among others. They're down. And, you know, consumer discretionary, that sort of catch-all category where you find Amazon.com and Tesla down as well. So, it's sort of the continuation of the story. You got bond yields going up, and the thinking behind it is that you are going to get a pickup in the economy. Well, do you need to be in the fastest growing companies when their shares have gone up for years and years and are relatively expensive when you compare them with the rest of the market? And so you see, the big tech stocks falling at this point. So,
right.
Certainly they're kind of carrying the day in terms of, say, the S&P 500. But at the same time, you do have a sort of on the one hand, on the other hand going on.
Right. My only argument would be that for big tech, you do have to be in them if that's where the growth is ultimately, and if that's where we all, that's the companies that everybody is tapping into. Mike, one thing, go back to the weekly jobless numbers. Jay Powell also making the point, it's going to take a while for us to get the labor market back to where it was pre-COVID. Those weekly jobless numbers are a reminder of that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how there's a lot of economists who don't believe the numbers themselves are accurate because of fraud or double counting mistakes made at the various states. But the idea that we still have that many people, 770,000, who are claiming initial jobless benefits, under whatever mistakes are being made, they're being made regularly, I guess, shows you that we still have a lot of slack in the labor market. And that's Jay Powell's point, that we won't really see inflation until you get wage inflation, and the kind that you're talking about that sticks. And that's a long way away because there's still a lot of workers who are out of work.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Dave, give us a teaser to the chart of the day.
Oh, what we're seeing today in terms of home building stocks and bond yields, therefore interest rates, not what we've seen for most of this quarter.
Oh, good. Looking forward to that. I love talking about housing and home builders. All right, guys, thank you so much. Dave Wilson, stocks editor at Bloomberg News on the remote access in New Jersey. Mike McKee, international economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News right here at our New York City bureau. Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day, one number that tells us a lot. It's brought to you by GEP. GEP helps businesses transform supply chains with strategy, managed services, and AI-based cloud-native software. Learn more, learn more at GEP.com. All right, today's number is 700. Peloton saying the company's production capacity grew 700% over the past year, and the supply of its exercise bikes is close to meeting demand. Peloton has been one of the fastest growing companies over the past year as people looked for new ways to stay active at home during the pandemic and accompanying gym closures. Listen, this has been one of the big pandemic plays, and I think people are questioning, what happens post-pandemic, but the company has certainly been tapping into growing its audience and hopefully looking to hold on to them, and also really expanding its digital platform. All right, coming up, we've got the cover story about the one essential company and the two feuding cousins behind it. We've got Goldman's first-year analyst saying basically, stop working us so hard. The firm also looking for some volunteers. We'll tell you exactly what they are looking for people to volunteer for. And then corporate voices on criminal justice reform and the death penalty. We're going to hear from Sir Richard Branson on that, as well as Mike Novogratz. He's the founder and CEO of Galaxy Digital. In the meantime, let's get a check on world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden will be speaking this afternoon about the state of coronavirus vaccines. It's expected he'll announce that his administration will meet the goal of 100 million shots, way ahead of his 100-day promise. As of yesterday, the U.S. had vaccinated nearly 98 million. Amesh Adalja is a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security.
We seem to have hit a stride. We were able to accelerate how quickly we can vaccinate. Now we're doing multiple millions of people per day, and everything seems to be getting much better. However, I think we still have a ways to go.
You can listen to the president's remarks at 3:45 Wall Street time right here on Bloomberg Radio. The European Union's drug regulatory agency said today experts have concluded the AstraZeneca vaccine is not linked to an overall increase in the risk of blood clots and that the benefits outweigh any risks. Russian President Vladimir Putin wants an apology from President Biden.
After President Biden publicly said Putin is a killer, Putin fired back saying, quote, "It takes one to know one," and then insisted the U.S. will have to consider Russia's interests despite the insults. Russia's foreign ministry says it expects an explanation from Washington and has recalled its ambassador. Putin and officials in his government are already under U.S. sanctions for election interference, attacks on political opponents, and the annexation of Crimea, and new sanctions could come as early as next week. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio. Well, have you filled out your March Madness college basketball brackets? Former President Obama has. He predicts Gonzaga will win it all. He also has Baylor, Illinois, and Michigan in his Final Four. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Do want to mention a headline just crossing the Bloomberg. The French Prime Minister announcing a Paris area lockdown. That is the only headline I've got. We'll bring you a little bit more on that as soon as it is known. Meantime, we mentioned Peloton just before the break there, and Peloton Interactive, certainly one of the pandemic plays, but it also came out today and said it learned about the death of a child following an accident with its high-end Tread Plus treadmill. The CEO, John Foley, making a disclosure and a message to some of its customers, quoting, "I'm reaching out to you today because I recently learned about a tragic accident involving a child and the Tread Plus, resulting in, unthinkably, a death. While we are aware of only a small handful of incidents involving the Tread Plus where children have been hurt, each one is devastating to all of us. At Peloton, our hearts go out to the families involved." Just wanted to mention that. Peloton shares, by the way, just down about 2.9%. Peloton, Charlie Pellet joining me right now, Bloomberg News. Peloton's definitely been one of the pandemic plays as people were stuck home. They were buying the bike. They were tapping into the app. That was because a lot of fitness places, gyms, and workout places, Charlie, they were closed.
Indeed, that's all part of what's been going on, especially here in New York City, where we have got a major conflict between our mayor here in New York, Bill de Blasio, and the governor, Andrew Cuomo. And at issue here is the speed with which the ban on working out at fitness gyms was lifted.
Right.
And we've got essentially four undercurrents here. It's state versus city, de Blasio versus Cuomo, reopening slow versus reopening fast, and politics versus data and science. All comes down to where you stand on this story, whether you're with the mayor or whether you're with the governor.
Right, and basically Governor Cuomo yesterday lifted a ban on indoor fitness classes shortly after Mayor de Blasio of New York City and other city health officials said they didn't think the city's virus cases had come down enough to resume the classes, which come with, of course, particular health risks. So the back and forth, listen, the back and forth is going on across the nation, but the back and forth, we've often seen this before between the governor and the mayor. So something we'll keep a watch on. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelota. Another leg lower for the S&P 500 index, down 25 points right now, a drop of 0.6%. The Dow holding on to a 76-point gain at a record, up 0.2%, while NASDAQ now slumping 244 points, down 1.8%. Technology shares are tumbling, Treasury yields touching some of the highest levels in more than a year, amid concern the Federal Reserve risks letting inflation accelerate. Right now, the 10-year yield, 1.72%. Gold is down $11 the ounce, down 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude now dropping 7.2%, selling intensifying there, back below $60 a barrel on WTI, $59.93 a barrel. We're keeping an eye on Chubb shares. That is the global insurer led by Evan Greenberg. It is exploring an acquisition, according to sources, of Hartford Financial Services Group in what could be one of the industry's biggest deals in years. Chubb CB on the ticker, down 0.7%. Hartford Financial Services surging now by 11%. Recapping, S&P down 26, a drop of 0.7%. 10-year yield 1.72%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We mentioned that French Prime Minister headline, French Prime Minister announcing a Paris area lockdown. It looks like that has to do with some COVID concerns. So we're tracking that. Keep in mind, President Biden, we're also tracking him. He is poised to meet his goal of delivering 100 million COVID-19 vaccine shots in his first 100 days of office. That we could hear from him on that today, and we are expected to hear from him a little bit later on. The global COVID cases, 121.3 million, deaths topping 2.68 million. So let's get an update on kind of where we are. Let's bring in Alexander White, Assistant Professor of Sociology and the History of Medicine at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Alexander on the phone in Baltimore. Alexander, nice to have you here. It does feel like vaccines are getting out to more people globally, certainly here in the United States. At the same time, you know, we still have a lot of cases and we still have areas of the world that are going into lockdown. How do you see kind of where we are when it comes to COVID-19?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
I think we're at an interesting inflection point with the pandemic, where obviously we're seeing large and much higher rates of vaccination, but we're also seeing concerning rises in cases. So at this moment, you know, it's very critical that we remain masking, we remain social distancing, while also getting out as many vaccines as possible.
Well, and to that point, we have often talked here on Bloomberg about the difficulty in reaching all populations, or all populations wanting to take the vaccine. But it does seem like increasingly the story is people want to take the vaccine, but they can't always figure out how to sign up for it, or if they don't have access to the technology to sign up, or they just can't get to a place to get the actual vaccine. How are you seeing that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's a very serious concern. You know, in the early days of when the vaccine was being rolled out in the United States, especially, the concern was overwhelmingly about vaccine hesitancy, especially in Black, Indigenous, and minority populations that have historically been negatively exposed to public health interactions, incidences of medical racism, et cetera. What we're seeing now is actually, you know, in many ways, those initial concerns about vaccine hesitancy are really dropping. And what's much more serious is as you mentioned, increasing access to the vaccine, increasing accessibility on how to access the vaccine, how to access technology to allow you to sign up, and these issues, which are becoming more and more important as we scale up the vaccine delivery across the country.
Well, let's talk about this organization that you've been working with, Communivax. Exactly who are they? What are they setting out to do?
Yeah, so Communivax is a national alliance of social scientists, public health experts, and community advocates who seek lasting solutions to this particular serious problem. As we all know, in the United States, historically underserved in the realm of healthcare, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx populations have endured negative health and economic impacts from COVID-19 pandemic at tragic and disproportionate rates. And while these communities could benefit greatly from safe and effective COVID-19 vaccinations, longstanding biases and barriers hinder their access to the vaccine. And our coalition is strengthening and attempting to strengthen national and local COVID vaccination efforts in the United States by really putting communities of color at the center of these endeavors, with the goal of building towards not only the equitable delivery of COVID-19 vaccines around the country, but also a push towards collaborative and equitable public health service that place minoritized communities really at the center of decision making.
Alexander,
Alexander,
let me just jump in for a second. Is it safe to say that the problem is, because I'm curious, how come there isn't the same access to all communities within the United States? And is it kind of similar to great health care? It isn't the same access to all communities of the United States. So there's a bigger, broader problem here. It's not just vaccine distribution, but it really digs more deeply into, the access to overall great health care here.
Exactly. And it is a bigger, broader problem. And it's something that, we take into account very seriously. One, in the United States, we've seen public health funding really decrease acutely in the last 20 years, but also really over a longer period of time, such that, as we've seen, we've been generally unprepared for large-scale pandemics of this sort. And as a result, we've especially seen lack of public health support, funding, and investment in underserved communities that would already be as a result of long-term systemic inequalities such as segregation, or even out of housing situation or broader lack of infrastructure support, really without access to healthcare, to public health intervention, and also, as we see most pressingly in this case, a lack of access to these vaccines. So it's a critical problem.
Hey, just got about 30 seconds here. In terms of the work that you guys are doing at Communivax, do you see that you're making progress in reaching out to these communities to make sure they do have that access to getting the COVID vaccine? Just quickly.
Yeah, we are seeing progress, and I think it's very exciting. We're working in local communities across the country, and we're amassing not only great strategies for increasing access, increasing transportation drives and things to sites, but also we're seeing ways of really building collaborative public health care campaigns for the future. COVID-19 vaccine mission is really only the beginning.
Well, good luck with all of your work. Great to hear about it. Alexander White, he is assistant professor of sociology and the history of medicine at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, of course, supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Alexander joining us on the phone in Baltimore. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, so if you check out the Bloomberg terminal right now, the number one and number two most read stories on the Bloomberg today have to do with Goldman Sachs. We'll tell you exactly what they are all about in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to your top business stories and a look at that trading day. Here is, once again, Charlie Billy.
Thank you very much. Financials doing okay today. Goldman Sachs among them, advancing 1.9% right now. And, of course, more on Goldman coming up in a moment. Keeping an eye on equities here. Lows of the day just about on the S&P 500 index, down now by 30. That is a drop of about 0.8%. The Dow holding on to a record, but those gains are fading as well, up 23 points now, higher by 0.1%. NASDAQ is down 272 points, a drop for the NASDAQ Composite Index now of just about 2%. NASDAQ 100 index down 2.2%. The SOX, that is the Philadelphia Stock Exchange's Semiconductor Stock Index, lower now by 2.8%. 10-year yield 1.73%. Technology tumbling. Treasury yields touching some of the highest levels in more than a year. Amid concern, the Fed risks letting inflation accelerate. Gold is down 0.6%, $17.34 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 7%. WTI now at $60.05 a barrel. Lots of developments involving AstraZeneca's drug today. The COVID-19 vaccine is safe to use, according to the European Union's drug regulator. Gives the bloc an opportunity to try to turn around its lagging inoculation campaign after months of disarray. And moments ago, France said it will resume using the vaccine tomorrow. France's prime minister says he'll be getting the AstraZeneca shot. AstraZeneca's ADRs down now by 1.9%. As of yesterday, the U.S. had vaccinated nearly 98 million people since President Biden's inauguration. The pace of shots has risen to an average of nearly 2.5 million a day for the last week. Dr. Jason Farley is a nursing professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He says, yes, while the news is good, we cannot let our guard down because the pandemic is global.
We are seeing cases increase throughout the European Union. We are seeing cases, particularly Italy, going back on lockdown. We are seeing new variants pop up across the United States. It is certainly not the time to be rolling back precautions.
Indeed, the Paris area going back on lockdown. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the other vaccine names today, Pfizer shares, they're down 1.1%. We've got Pfizer up 0.1%. AstraZeneca, as I mentioned, down 1.1%. BioNTech lower now by 3%. Moderna is down 2.9%. Johnson & Johnson, that's the single-shot vaccine, down 0.1%. Recapping, stocks now lower across the board. The Dow just turning negative, giving up earlier gains, down by 0.1%. S&P down 1%. 10-year yield 1.73%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So, yeah, it's been a pretty busy week for this next reporter and the venerable Wall Street firm Goldman Sachs. We've got two stories, not one, two stories about Goldman today on the Bloomberg terminal. They are the most read number 1 and 2 in the past 8 hours on the Bloomberg. Reporting on Goldman, Sri Natarajan. He's our finance reporter at Bloomberg News. He joins us on the phone in New York City. You've had a busy week.
Well, it's a prominent institution, always making news. What can I do, Carol?
I know. Indeed. So listen, first of all, let's talk about that move down south to West Palm Beach by Goldman. It feels like it's picking up some momentum and reality to it.
Oh, absolutely. If you remember back in December, we talked about how Goldman Sachs executives were weighing the option of centering their asset management business somewhere in South Florida. They were looking at offices in between the Miami to Palm Beach corridor. The idea being you create a new hub, and that pretty much sits in line with CEO David Solomon's strategy of moving more jobs into cheaper locales to trim expenses for the bank. Florida, of course, garners more interest just because this is also the time in our economy, in fact, in New York's economy, if you may, where a number of firms from this experience of remote working over the last year have had serious conversations, and this is a discussion that is happening across many boardrooms in corporate America is, do you really need all your employees to be working out of one big central location or prominent cities when you could offer possibly, ostensibly, a better standard of living in cheaper cities further away from the center? And the experience of remote working, the experience of working almost seamlessly for many of the big firms from disparate locations has given rise to this idea to the art of the possible, and they realized that they could move more jobs away from big city centers like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and still function properly and improve their bottom line.
So, and this is what David Solomon calls, is it high-value cities?
That is indeed a very Goldman terminology, high-value locations, but simply put, it translates to locations that are not as expensive as New York City.
Yeah, well, listen, Shri, does it come down to that? It's just about cutting costs, or is it something more? Because it does feel very much, I feel like the conversations we've been having with you as of late of David Solomon, he calls himself a modern CEO, really kind of remaking Goldman to some extent in his own image, but maybe also for the 21st century.
I think one thing that we have to be clear about is this idea of moving jobs to high-value locations at Goldman has been underway for about a decade.
Okay.
In the last 10 years, we've seen places like Salt Lake City in Utah, Dallas in Texas, where you've already shifted a number of jobs because Goldman did realize that it could garner benefits from moving jobs there. A lot of their jobs, that especially back office roles in their new consumer operations, are centered out of Salt Lake City. They've also moved a number of legal compliance and similar roles to places like Dallas. So it is a shift that's been happening. Mm-hmm. But under Solomon, I think Goldman has leaned a little harder into the strategy. You've heard them talk on earnings calls and at conferences that the experience of the pandemic has taught them that they were not giving themselves enough credit for how well they could operate from a varied number of locations. And at the end of the day, if it is going to help with the bottom line, why shy away from it?
Yeah, why not, right? Hey, listen, your second most read story on the Bloomberg today has talks about Goldman bankers, Goldman analysts, those first-year analysts begging to work only 80-hour weeks. Basically, they're pushing back. Just got about 35 seconds. What do we need to know about this story?
Well, the most important thing you need to know is if I ever beg for saying, please let me work only 80 hours a week, please take me to a back alley and shoot me. But that is the reality of Wall Street. You work these big crazy hours for the big bucks. The hope is, it clashes against this idea that the softer kind of Wall Street was promoting a better work-life balance. But in this past 12 months of crazy banking business, it seems that dream hasn't quite panned out.
They just want to shower. They just want to eat, Shri. They're just asking for a little bit of time.
Sounds like they just had a kid and they're trying to juggle work and life.
Yeah, we all can relate to that. All right, Shri, great stuff. Really appreciate it. Shri Natarajan, he's finance reporter at Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone in New York City. Let's get another update on world and national news. For that, Nancy Lyons, she's in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. New details are emerging about the string of deadly shootings in Atlanta area massage parlors that left 8 people dead, including 6 Asian women. We got that story from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
The suspect in the deadly shootings bought a gun that same day. That's what a lawyer for Big Woods Guns in Metro Atlanta is saying about 21-year-old Robert Aaron Long. The New York Times reports it's unclear whether the gun he purchased from the store was the 9mm he was arrested with. The lawyer says the business complied with all laws and regulations and is complying with authorities. Georgia doesn't have a waiting period for firearms purchases. Gun control advocates say if it did, 8 deaths might have been averted. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Lawmakers are investigating discrimination and hate crimes against Asian Americans. Tennessee Democrat Steve Cohen opened today's House hearing by calling for a moment of silence for the victims of this week's deadly shootings in the Atlanta area. He says Asian Americans have been targets ever since the coronavirus pandemic began in China.
These incidents include cases of verbal harassment, being spat at, slapped in the face, lit on fire, slashed with a box cutter, or shoved violently to the ground.
Texas Republican Chip Roy says all bad guys should be arrested and prosecuted for committing crimes, but he also warned against policing thought. Tomorrow, President Biden and Vice President Harris will meet in Atlanta with leaders in the Asian American community to discuss the uptick in hate crimes that Biden has called un-American. They've canceled the Atlanta event they had planned to promote the American Relief Plan. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Charlie Pellet, and we were just talking about some of the most read stories on the Bloomberg. Two of them, number one and number two in the past 8 hours, have to do with Goldman, but there's another big Wall Street firm, financial firm, that's also atop the most read, and that has to do with Credit Suisse. Specifically, a couple of stories actually on Credit Suisse today. One talks about how they have raced to contain the widening fallout from the collapse of Greensill Capital as it acknowledged defaults are coming in a $10 billion group of now frozen funds that the bank touted once for their safety. And the CEO, Thomas Gottstein, who was, largely shied away from making deep changes since taking over about a year ago. Charlie, looks like he's starting to make some changes.
Indeed. A lot of client outrage, regulatory probes over the collapse of the short-term debt funds. The Swiss bank demoting one of its top executives. It's withholding bonuses for some, separating the asset management unit at the center of the scandal from the much more valuable wealth unit. So plenty going on here. The bank, by the way, has so far returned about $3.1 billion to investors, says it has an additional $1.25 billion in cash across the four funds. But as you mentioned at the open, all of this coming back to funds that the bank had touted for their safety.
And listen, this is something, that became, I think, a heightened awareness after the financial crisis, and this has to do with things like clawbacks, because Credit Suisse apparently is suspending the bonuses, as you said, Charlie, of some top managers. They're going to weigh clawbacks as they continue to deal with this fallout from Greensill Capital. The payout and vesting of variable compensation for a number of senior employees involved in Greensill up to and including the executive board, they are on hold so the bank can consider variable compensation for 2020. So they're continuing to evaluate the situation, but times have changed since the financial crisis, and accountability seems to be a bigger thing nowadays, Charlie.
Indeed, and just want to mention, too, that this story obviously playing big in Switzerland. Credit Suisse, their top provider of investment management services for retirees.
All right, good stuff, Charlie. And again, one of our most read stories on the Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Tech tumbles, yields rise. From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Right to the numbers, red on the screen. Lows of the day for NASDAQ down 319, lower now by 2.4%. S&P lows of the day actually bouncing off the bottom, but well off session highs, down 40 now, a drop there of 1%. Dow Industrials turning from positive to negative moments ago. Right now we have got the Dow down 33 points, lows of the day down by 0.1%. 10-year yield 1.72%. Gold is down 0.7%, 17.33 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude slumping 7.3%. WTI back below 60, 59.86 a barrel. Tech shares falling. Treasury yields touching some of the highest levels in more than a year. Amid concern, the Federal Reserve risks letting inflation accelerate. Higher yields boosting financial shares. However, a drop in oil weighing on the energy sector. Again, West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 7.3%. 10-year yield at 1.72%. S&P down 42, a drop of 1%. NASDAQ down 2.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, February is Women's History Month, and throughout the month, Bloomberg is celebrating pivotal moments. Here with more is Bloomberg's Renita Young.
On this day in women's history in 1970, over 100 women staged a sit-in at the Ladies' Home Journal, occupying the office for 11 hours. They were protesting the way the magazine depicted female interests and perspectives. At the time, the staff of the Ladies' Home Journal was comprised mostly of men. Protesters argued that the content focused almost entirely on housework, beauty, and the support of the patriarchy. On that day, protesters made demands to the editor-in-chief, John Mack Carter, and senior editor, Lenore Hershey, who was one of the only women on staff. Among those demands were the hiring of a female editor-in-chief and an all-female editorial staff, raising women's salaries and hiring diverse women. Later on in 1973, Hershey was named editor-in-chief. That's today in women's history. I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Renita, thank you so much. Well, this week's cover story is about an essential business during the pandemic that also happens to be the one company in the U.S. that makes a very important thing for COVID tests. And it also is about the two feuding cousins behind the business. The tale told by Bloomberg News technology reporter Olivia Carville. She joins us right here in our Interactive Brokers studio, along with Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. First of all, Joel, I mean, who knew so much was going on behind those very important nasal swabs?
That's right. This is, I think, one of my favorite stories that we've published over the last year. I think it's a great untold story of the pandemic, which is basically, imagine having a business that, a year ago, the world discovers we're going to need a lot more nasal swabs, and you happen to be basically one of two companies in the world that makes them. And this is a company called Puritan. It's a closely held family company in Maine. At the very outset of the pandemic, we happened to have done a photo shoot, basically showing their operation. And Olivia came to us a couple of months later and said, by the way, do you guys know about this epic lawsuit between the two cousins who own the business? And we were like, no, tell us more. So Olivia, tell us more. Who are the owners and what are they feuding over?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. The owners of Puritan is Timothy Templett and John Cartwright. They're both based up in Maine. This is a family business. It's been around for, more than 100 years now. And they haven't liked each other for a really long time. One of the most fascinating things about reporting this story is the timing of it all. Like in the lead up to the pandemic, probably 2 years before COVID really hit or became a household name, they stopped speaking to each other. One of them just walked out of a meeting and refused to have anything to do with the other. And they refused to be in the same room, didn't want to talk to each other, and that led to some really big problems inside the company. There was their manufacturing equipment wasn't being modernized. They weren't updating their technology. Their back office technology system was 20 years old. They hadn't updated their wages or given staff salary increases. And then 3 weeks, literally 3 weeks before the White House called this company to say, we need you to ramp up swab production, one of them filed a lawsuit against the other to dissolve the entire business.
All right, and then walks in the government.
Exactly, yeah.
And that brought them all together, and they're now happy and happily living, ever after.
Well, that's a really interesting part of the story, is that the government was like, we need you to set aside your differences for the good of the country. And they said that they would, but we accessed the legal file, and inside private courtroom sessions, they continued to fight and are still fighting to this day.
Which, let's go ahead and talk about the money here. How much money has the U.S. government put into making sure Puritan keeps the swabs coming?
Over the past year, they've invested $250 million into the company, and plans are underway for another facility in Tennessee, so that's only going to go up.
I mean, why don't they get along? And I know in your story you talk about that it might have started as they were kids. I mean, but it's noticeable. Employees know it. And it wasn't until, the president visited that they were actually seen together.
Yeah. I think that they're just both really stubborn. They both have their own vision for how they see the future of the company going. Puritan has actually got a sister business called Hardwood, which started out making minted toothpicks like 100 years ago. And John Cartwright, one of the cousins, is really heavily involved in the Hardwood side of the business, and Timothy Templett is involved in the Puritan, the medical side. And as these two companies had kind of gone in different directions, they really struggled to kind of work together to see a future for both of them. So, just two stubborn people who had their own vision and just didn't want to back down.
Okay, so you got to spend some time in Maine this summer, which made the reporting so much greater, Carol, just to have Olivia basically being pitching the story and then being by the way, I'm going to be in Maine for a little while. I was like, oh my God, you can't make this up. Amazing. So you got to know basically everyone in Guilford. So put us on the ground in Guilford.
That wasn't that hard, Joel. There are only 1,500 people who live in Guilford.
So
right.
Tell us about the company and how it fits into Maine and the meaning of it all.
Yeah, well, Guilford is a tiny town. There is one restaurant there, which also serves as the local bar. There's no Starbucks, there's no McDonald's, very, very small town America. And Hardwood Puritan, or the business, is the biggest part of the whole town. They do a lot for the town. They often put on fireworks shows, they donate playground equipment, they help maintain the local parks. Everyone who lives in Guilford knows the company, has either worked there, had a family member who worked there, or knows the owners specifically. Everyone knows where they grew up, they can point out their homes. John Cartwright has quite a big sprawling estate on one of the highways heading out of Guilford, and people actually make directions based around his home. They're like, oh, take a left after the, John's giant white mansion on the corner. So the feud between the owners was really, really well known in the town as well. Okay, so you've spent months on this story. What's your favorite detail from all the great reporting that you did?
And just have about 35 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I think it was really going through the court documents and seeing just the extent of the fight. They disagreed on everything from the location of the case to delaying the case when the pandemic hit to expediting it to putting it off altogether. And then when Bloomberg filed a motion to access the legal documents, they actually disagreed on how to respond to that as well. One of them said, no, we're going to fight it and push back. And the other said, oh, it's okay, go for it. You can access the documents if you want them. So just the extent of their disagreement was unbelievable.
All right, I do say this several times, but I do feel like this could be, again, like a Netflix or Amazon series because it's amazing. And what I hear is there's going to be an Olivia Carville Street in Guilford. No, I don't know that.
I doubt it.
It's a great story. So much information, and we'll put it out on Twitter, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. Olivia, thank you. Olivia Carville of Bloomberg News, along with Joel Weber of Bloomberg Business Week. If you're listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business.
stocks, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Thursday, March 18th. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all lower, technology tumbling, treasury yields touching some of the highest levels in more than a year. Amid concern, the Fed risks letting inflation accelerate. Right now, the 10-year yield, 1.72%. Those higher yields boosting financials, helping pair declines in the S&P. A drop in oil, though, weighing on the energy sector. West Texas Intermediate crude down 7.8%. A lot of the big oil names moving lower as well. ExxonMobil, for example, down 3.6%. BP's tumbling 2.8%. Chevron lower now by 2.7%. EOG Resources down 3.7%. Pioneer Natural down 3.3%. And the oil ETF, USO on the ticker, it is down now by 7.3%. The Dow back on the plus side, barely, up 9 points, up less than 0.1%. S&P down 37, down 0.9. NASDAQ down 314, a drop there of 2.3%. Well, as for the market backdrop, Tony Dwyer is equity strategist at Canaccord Genuity.
It is stunning to me that somehow we're surprised that the Fed has done exactly what they said they were going to do for the last 6 months. Literally, every time Powell is on TV, and most of his governors, including the vice chair, who said he wants inflation above 2% for a full year before they think about raising rates, somehow we're baffled by the fact that they didn't lie.
The European Union's drug regulator says AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine is safe to use, giving the bloc an opportunity to try to turn around its lagging inoculation campaign after months of disarray. AstraZeneca's ADR is down 0.9%. Pfizer shares, they're unchanged. BioNTech down 2.9%. Moderna's down 3.2%. Johnson & Johnson down by 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio. So top story at this hour really is taking a look at our geopolitical world. We have the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. They are meeting with their Chinese counterparts in Alaska. We also have the not-so-nice back and forth between President Biden and President Putin. So let's get a roundup of kind of what you need to be keeping an eye on. Nick Wadhams is foreign policy reporter at Bloomberg News. He's with us on the phone in Washington, D.C. There is a lot going on. Nick, I feel like geopolitically, and I do think the Biden administration is kind of making the rounds to kind of either set the record straight or just say it's going to be a different type of administration you're dealing with, or perhaps same. Let's talk about the U.S. and China, first of all. What should we expect out of this meeting? What is it?
Well, the point of the meeting, really, according to the Biden administration, is that this is an opportunity for them to say in private what they've been saying in public all along. That's a little bit different from how things have been done in the past with the Chinese. Normally, what you would do is have various public statements and then work out some sort of a deal or accommodation behind closed doors. So there are really two things happening here. One is to say, okay, hey, all that stuff we're saying publicly, we actually mean that. We're not going to give you any easy wins or concessions behind closed doors. But at the same time, there is this recognition that these are the two biggest economies in the world, and you do kind of have to deal with each other. So far, they've really just danced around each other. There have been no official high-level meetings between U.S. and Chinese leaders. The Biden-Xi phone call took place very late, several weeks after Biden became president. So it's just a meeting of the two sides across the table, but we are not expecting any big deliverables from this meeting.
Nick, you understand this stuff better than all of us. I mean, when President Biden doesn't call President Xi until a few weeks into his administration, is that just a case of the president signaling to, those voters who put him in the White House, like, listen, I've got your back first. I'm going to deal with the virus first. Is that what that was about? Or did it also, at the same time, kind of send a message to President Xi?
Well, there are two things
As two of the key developed economies in the world, China and the United States, do you anticipate, Nick, that they will ultimately find ways to work on things like climate change, find ways to agree when it comes to human rights violation, particularly in China, find ways to cooperate, as they both want to be, dominant players in a lot of key things, whether it's industries or whether it's politics or whether it is, energy?
Right. It's a great question because there's real tension within the administration right now among those who believe that climate change is really the existential threat, and everything needs to take a back seat to efforts to fix climate change. And you can't do that without China, because these are the world's two largest polluters. So you have to find some sort of accommodation. On the other side, though, there is this belief from a lot of people within the administration that it's just simply going to be impossible to come to any accommodation with China when the U.S. and Chinese interests diverge so much and they're in such direct competition. And no one has really said what the end state for that competition is. How do they live together in some sense of, if not harmony, at least relative quiet? And right now, I think the Biden administration is still very much working through how to resolve those tensions. So very big issue across so many different policy areas, and it's by no means settled at all within the administration.
All right, so let's move to Russia and the back and forth. President Biden calling Putin a killer, and then you have Putin coming back and says it takes one to know one. Feels like, how old are they? How do we, I don't know, what are we supposed to, I think about our audience, it's smart, they're investors, they're thinking about a lot of things and how it plays into, everything and financial markets and business getting along. I don't know, what do we need to know here?
Well, the big thing is I think what you're seeing from Biden is, again, an effort to really separate himself from Trump. So while the Trump administration at a lower level, officials really were quite tough on Russia, sanctions, things like that, diplomatic expulsions, you never heard President Trump actually criticize Vladimir Putin. So obviously the Biden administration wants to make a very clear distinction on that. We do understand that they are working through plans to potentially introduce new sanctions on Russia in the coming days or weeks. And the tension there really is, okay, there's plenty you could do to cause a great deal of pain on Russia. You could go after folks close to Putin, some of the oligarchs. You could go after Russia's sovereign debt. We know that they have considered those options. The problem with all these sort of sanctions actions is if you do something too severe, it risks blowing up in the face of the United States. So they did that when they went after Oleg Deripaska and basically caused turmoil in the aluminum industry. So that debate is still very much underway in this administration, figuring out how to deliver that message to Vladimir Putin without it blowing up in the U.S. states.
Well, and it's interesting. We already did have a headline cross the Bloomberg terminal about how the President Biden, that is, weighing new sanctions to block the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's that kind of contentious Russian gas pipeline, right, directed toward Europe.
Right. So, again, you very much see that because there are ways that the administration could put real pressure on that pipeline, in part, which would be to sanction German entities. Nord Stream AG is the company that oversees the pipeline itself, and they have so far not been sanctioned. But the administration is coming under so much pressure, bipartisan pressure from lawmakers at home, to really stop that pipeline in its tracks, even though it's about 95% completed. And so the debate there is, okay, do you go after German entities, even though that would risk a political fight with Germany, and also run counter, as we mentioned before, to this idea of Biden's that he wants to work closely with allies. There are a few European allies that are more important than Germany, and suddenly we're going to essentially open a new political battle with them. So again, something the administration is still wrestling with.
Hey, one last question. Just got about a minute or so left here. What's the relationship between the U.S., China, Russia? Is that a complicated one?
It's extremely complicated because the U.S. Is intensifying its competition with Russia and China, but also needs Russian and Chinese help for all sorts of issues that are a priority for this government. I mean, North Korea, denuclearization of North Korea, climate change, obviously, Iran. Russia and Iran were signatories to the nuclear deal that Biden wants to get back into. And the U.S. is not going to get back into that deal without help from Russia and China. So, I mean, this is geopolitics. You've got to balance all these things. And still a long way to see how it's going to shake out.
No one ever said it was going to be easy. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I wanted to lay out for our listeners. So thank you so much. Nick Wadhams, he's U.S. foreign policy reporter at Bloomberg News. Check him out on Twitter at nwadhams. That's NWADHAMS. And check him out, all of his work on Bloomberg.com. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get another check on world and national news. Lots going on. Here's Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol. We are waiting on President Biden to make some comments about the vaccination effort. He's going to be speaking from the White House. This comes as he's set to meet his goal of delivering 100 million shots in his first 100 days, 6 weeks ahead of schedule. We get more on that from Bloomberg's government's Emily Wilkins.
We have, at this point, 98 million people who have gotten their vaccine. The current rate of vaccinations are about 2.5 million people per day. So barring any unforeseen incidents or something going terribly wrong, we are on track to meet that 100 million mark today.
We'll bring Biden's remarks to you in just minutes. Senators heard from those leading the vaccination effort today, with Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, saying we need to keep ahead of the variants.
Fortunately for us, the response to the vaccine has been so robust that there still has been enough cushion that you likely would maybe not necessarily prevent infection, but certainly prevent severe disease resulting in hospitalizations and deaths.
Fauci says the real way to prevent the variants from spreading is to be vaccinated and to wear masks and socially distance. History was made today when Deb Haaland became the first Native American confirmed as a secretary of a cabinet agency. She was sworn in as Interior Secretary by Vice President Kamala Harris.
I, Deborah Holland. I, Deborah Holland. Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear that I will
Becerra
support and defend.
narrowly won confirmation today to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. That vote was 50 to 49, which was the closest vote for a Biden nominee so far. Senator Susan Collins was the only Republican to vote for Becerra's confirmation. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Back to you, Carol.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. We are awaiting President Biden to deliver remarks on the state of vaccinations. We are going to bring that to you live when we get it. But in the meantime, let's talk a little Richard Branson.
Let's do that, because you caught up with him.
I did. You know, people know him because of Virgin Galactic and Virgin and, of course, airlines, and because they know Richard Branson. But he's been an outspoken opponent of the death penalty, and he's going all in on that, along with Celia Willett, who's the CEO of Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, their campaign to abolish the death penalty in the U.S., and working with other business leaders around the world to do this. I spoke with him recently, and in this excerpt, Branson explains what motivated him to get involved with the initiative.
Well, it is, in my opinion, inhumane and barbaric. It doesn't deter or reduce crime. It doesn't make communities safer. But, you know, perhaps most importantly, it has a shocking rate of error. I mean, if you take the US, I've personally met 150 people who've been freed from death row, having been found to be innocent. It took enormous time and effort by lawyers to prove their innocence. Most of those people were black. And when you meet them, they are some of the most delightful people you could meet. The fact that they could have been executed was palpably wrong. So as a entrepreneur and a businessman, I couldn't sort of stand back and just let people continue to be executed for crimes they didn't commit. And we decided to try to rally business leaders to speak out strongly about it.
Well, Celia, what role does the private sector have when it comes to pushing government reforms?
Businesses have like such loud voices, you know, they have kind of currency on the table when it comes to speaking to legislators in particular. You know, they have a kind of credibility and they're sort of unusual allies at any campaign. And, you know, I think when they join forces and they kind of partner closely with the campaign community and they really listen to what the campaigners and advocates need and movement leaders lead and offer that thing in return and meet them at the table and offer them something to support, that's when kind of real impact and real change happens. And I think that's what we're seeing with this campaign.
Richard, I'm wondering what role as a leader you have when you balance that you want to do business in a country, you want to do business with a country, but the country is doing something that you don't necessarily agree with. For example, the human rights violations that have been documented in China. You know, this is a global a market where a lot of global companies want to be. How do you balance that as a manager?
Sometimes you don't do business. I mean, like in Brunei, when they said they were going to execute gay people, or in Uganda, where they said they were going to execute gay people, we said, you know, we cannot do business with you as a country if you're going to behave like that. I think when it comes to capital punishment, you know, there's raging arguments on both sides, and a lot of people just don't know the facts. And you know, my wife has, you know, if somebody commits a heinous crime, she'll want to see them executed, whereas myself and the rest of our family definitely would not. And it's only when I explain to my wife and to other businesses all the facts, and they have all the facts on their fingertips, that they understand that the death penalty is wrong. And countries can be a little bit like that too. You've got to get in there and you know and persuade them. And fortunately, about 170 countries have now been persuaded, and they've abolished the death penalty. I mean, you've got North Korea, you've got Iran, you've got China, you know, and I'm afraid you've got America. But the vast majority of civilized countries and Western countries have abolished it, and some for as long as 70 years without any increase in crime as a result.
So, Richard, I got to ask you about space and SPACs, two things that you are very involved in. Virgin Galactic, the space company you founded, were you surprised that Chamath Palihapitiya, the chairman, of course, of Virgin Galactic, were you surprised when he liquidated his personal stake in the company earlier this month? After all, in an interview last month with my colleague Eric Schatzker, he said that he was committed to his SPAC holdings.
You know, we're talking about the death penalty today, and I'm not going to get drawn on other subjects, except to say that I have enormous respect for Chamath. He's still got his stake in us through his SPAC. And you know, I think he plans to make a big announcement of how he's going to use that particular money, and so watch this space.
All right, watch this space. Stay tuned. See what Chamath does with the money. That, of course, was Sir Richard Branson, Virgin founder, and Celia Willett, CEO of Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, talking about their campaign to abolish the death penalty in the U.S. But you got to ask about space.
Well, you have to. Listen, this is someone who has been around for a while, has, you know, from Virgin Records to Virgin Airways to Virgin Galactic, I mean, has really seen the global business environment from several different angles, thinks about kind of the world at large. And it's just really, truly one of those individuals you could sit for hours and just kind of pick his brain about.
Yeah, and
so many things.
Obviously he's